would like to share some of the experiences that we have had over the last few years in the field of climate change, Himalaya and water. Scope of the presentation is limited to drinking water. We are not talking of water for irrigation or for hydropower generation, for manufacturing. It's water for drinking. That's the scope of the presentation. And these are the team members who have been working with me as a team, and we have been collaborating with many institutions and organizations within the country, and it's a shared learning that I would like to share with you. So as has been told by other eminent people before me, the Himalayas and the mountains all over the world, they are considered as water towers. And if you see this global map, it's prepared by the Geography Department in University of Bern. So they highlight the areas where the importance of mountains are very much there as far as lowland water resources are concerned. So if you see the red spots, those are the areas where the people depend mostly on water which is generated from the mountains. Whether it is the Himalayas, whether it is South Africa, whether it is the Andes mountains, whether it is the Rocky mountains. So these mountains play a very important role in providing water to the lowlands. Even in the Ganges Valley of India also, the water comes from the mountains. So this is a very useful map which tells us how important role the mountains play in lowland water resources. So we come to the issue of managing this resource. So managing this resource is not easy because water has got multiple roles, especially in the Himalaya. It's a lifeline, it's a source of life. At the same time, at times it causes destruction, it causes floods, it causes landslides. So it has got multiple roles. At the same time, if you see the fluctuation is, compared to other resources, it fluctuates very widely. Within the same year, you will have floods, and then after a few months, you will again have droughts. So as a resource, it fluctuates very widely. So the issue of managing this water is very vital because it fluctuates a lot. Thirdly, unlike other resources like forestry resources or mineral resources, this is a mobile resource. It has got transboundary implications, it has got upstream, downstream issues, and it's widely regarded still in the Indian system as a global resource. So in the Sikkim Himalaya also, water, the people who are the givers of water, they don't consider it appropriate to assign a value to water. It's considered as a global resource. At the same time, it has got diverse forms, especially in the Himalaya. You've got glaciers, snow, runoff, base flow. So yeah, disaggregating these different components of water can be a complex issue. And finally, the threats that are coming up because of changes in land use, changes in climate, these are the new threats that this water sector is facing. So because of this complex nature of water, managing this resource is very, very vital for us. So these are the main water resources in the Himalaya. We have got glaciers, snow, rivers, permafrost, and lakes, streams and springs. So these are the various water resources in the Himalaya. And if you see, a lot of studies have taken place on glaciers and snow and rivers. Studies have been done by National Institute of Hydrology in Roorkee, by professors in University of Bern, and a lot of hydrologists have done a lot of studies on glaciers and rivers because we have got a history of data collected by Central Water Commission. There are remote sensing studies for glacial retreat. So a lot of data is available, so you can actually do a lot of studies, and it's an established science to predict the flow of rivers, the low flow of rivers during low season, the retreat of glaciers. So these areas are quite well studied, we have got good data on them. But as far as streams and springs are concerned, they are mostly rain-fed, they are snow-fed, and as far as the Himalayan people are concerned, they play the major role in drinking water. So these are the areas where there's not much research. Some research was done by Dr. Waldia, and from Western Himalaya there are quite a few studies by GCS Negi, Dr. Varun Joshi, and these studies tell us that these springs are drying up, the streams are also dying up. Earlier because of land use changes, now climate change is the new threat. And as far as mountain people are concerned, for them drinking water means more or less largely springs and streams, not glaciers and rivers. Rivers and glaciers are far above, rivers are far below. Mountain people stay in the mid hills, and they are also quite amazed that we depend on springs and streams, and a lot of studies have taken place on glaciers and rivers which actually support the lowlands. So if we focus on glaciers and rivers as far as climate change is concerned, it's a lowland perspective. And from the IMI's perspective, I feel we should focus on the drinking water resources on which the mountain people depend on. So this is what we have been working on in the last 3-4 years. So the questions that we need to answer is, in every village in the Himalaya, we need to ask this question: what is your drinking water source? Whether it's a spring, whether it's a stream, whether it's a lake, whether it's a river, whether it's a glacier, whether it's permafrost, whether it's roof water harvesting, what is your source of water? Second question is, who, the water that is there, who owns it? What is the landowner? What is the ownership? What is the discharge pattern? If it's a spring and stream, how does it vary over space? How does it vary over time? And at the same time, not only the water source, but its recharge area as well. Recharge area, what is the status? What is the land use? These are important questions for us. And then that is the supply side and demand side. How many people are dependent on it? What is the per capita, per day availability of water? How does it vary over the seasons? And at the same time, because of reduced water availability, even if climate change was not there, there is reduced water during the summers. So how women and people are coping with this reduced availability of water? What are the activities that they curtail so that they are able to still survive and sustain? And then the last and most important question is it possible to revive our springs? Is it possible to revive our streams? Is it possible to revive our lakes? That is the question. So I would like to share some of the experiences of my team over the last 4 years working in the field of environmental change and drinking water. So the first question is, these are the partners. When we started asking these questions 4 years back, we got the support of WWF India, and at the same time G.V. Pant Institute, there was a very good geologist, Dr. Varun Joshi. So he had experience of having this spring sanctuary concept in the Western Himalaya. He shared his ideas with us. Then People Science Institute, Dehradun, Dr. Ravi Chopra is there. They gave us very good grassroots concepts that helped us to take this concept to the people. So that connect with people was primarily because of PSI. They simplified this technology and this science for us. Then Aquadam Pune, they gave us this concept of geohydrology, about geology, deep inclination and escarpment slopes. All these new things we learned from them. Argem Bangalore has been a support for us in many ways. They have helped us in the portal that we have developed, and we are in constant touch with them. They are supporting civil society organizations here. Chirag Nainital has also helped us in the implementation of our programs. And with Bhabha Atomic Research Center, we are planning an isotope study for identifying the recharge areas. So as you see, there are GIZ Delhi, we have a partnership with them. They helped us in the most drought-prone area in South District. They helped us to take up equipment mapping for us. So several organizations have been our support to understand this program. So in terms of Sikkim, what people have been doing traditionally to conserve the water resources. So wherever we have water resources, more or less in most of these locations, we have got Devi Than. So it is a traditional concept wherein people designate the origin of the spring as a sacred space. And they protect that area, even if it's a private land or a public land, that area is protected, and people don't have any other land use in that. Water collection, firewood collection, defecation, all these things are not allowed. So this is a traditional practice in the Sikkim Himalayas. And this cultural force actually helped in preserving the spring, because there was no destruction at the mouth of the spring. So the first thing that we did was, before launching our program, was to analyze what are the existing programs in this field. So we found that there are a few programs. It was known as water source development. In the name of water source development, we used to make a stone wall around the spring. We used to plant some particular species of trees called dhokre phool, wild banana, terminarias, and few more species. And the concept was that if you plant these trees and these shrubs, they have the capacity of drawing up water, and your water in the spring will increase. That was one concept. So they call it dhokre phool, kera, panisaj, kenjal. If you plant that, suddenly water will start oozing and you will have more water. So even government programs were very similar to that. And then there was a traditional approach of protecting the spring, just the Devi Than concept. So we found that both these concepts were not fully scientifically validated, and the experts whom we worked with, they said that the water that is coming out from the spring, it's useful to protect the spring, but at the same time we need to protect the catchment and the recharge area. That is where the water is going inside and feeding into the spring. So the previous concept, when the Sikkim was very well forested, we had less population. That time probably water quality was the only issue, and people protected the source of the spring to ensure that the quality of water remained good. So now with availability of water becoming an issue, the recharge area is very important for us now. Second concept was, there are these hilltop forests. On the top of the hills there are forests, people stay below these hills. So how we can enhance the hydrological impact of this forest. This was the second idea that we explored. This was a bigger program. Then at the same time we have these natural reservoirs or hilltop lakes. So how we can use these lakes to store the runoff so that they can help to recharge the groundwater. Then we also found that there was a traditional practice. People told us that wherever they had paddy cultivation, the springs below this paddy cultivation were very healthy. And whenever this paddy cultivation was discontinued, the springs below these paddy fields also dried up. So this paddy cultivation land use has to be promoted if we have to protect the springs downstream. So paddy cultivation was also supported. Sloping lands were terraced. Water storage infrastructure was improved. And the most important thing in any program are the people. And you need people at the implementation level. So we had a huge program in which we tried to develop these para-professionals who could understand and implement our programs in geohydrology. So we conducted, you will be surprised to know, in 3 years we had more than 100 training programs, and we have had exposure visits to all parts of the country. And this team is the core team now. So we have had research and development also. So this is the simple concept that whatever rainwater we have, reduce the runoff, ensure that more and more water infiltrates down, and the more the water recharges your springs and streams, more water you will have during the rain season. So the most of the surface runoff happens on sloping lands where you have, we call it Pakha here. So all those agricultural lands which are barren and sloping, maximum runoff takes place there. Forest lands, even if they are forested, maximum surface runoff takes there. At the same time, wherever you have these lands which are barren, you have got high runoff. So how we can have more terracing and more capture of runoff from lands and to improve their hydrological potential. So first thing that we did was we did a vulnerability assessment, which out of the 165 gram panchayats in Sikkim, which are the gram panchayats which are most vulnerable to climate change. So this is the table, so you can see this research paper is available in Current Science. So these are the parameters that were used, and we found that the people in South Sikkim, the lower part, were the most vulnerable to climate change, primarily because they were mostly farmers, dependent on rain-fed farming, and it was a drought-prone area of Sikkim. They had large number of winter droughts. So these were the people and these were the areas that we targeted for our programs. So these are the simple impacts of climate change. Mostly women are bearing the brunt for, these are the water supply schemes. So in Sikkim, 90% of the people have got water supply connection at their doorstep. It is among the few states which have been able to achieve that. So while the water supply system is there, the water is drying out now. So though the system is there, there is no water flowing during the rain season. So the women have to now go further and further, longer distances, many times down to the hill to carry water, and this causes a lot of hardships. So this is the challenge of the program, how we can ensure that women have access to water during the dry season. It's very simple. How women can have access to water during dry season. That is the challenge for us. Okay, so first thing was to understand the resource. So we did a resource survey with help of our partners to understand. So the first step that was done was we did a survey, extensive survey covering around 600-700 springs of the state to understand them better. So we have a web portal called sikkimsprings.org, wherein all this information of springs is loaded into, and we have got our weather stations, we have got this information linked with Google Earth. So this information is dynamically available in the public domain. And all the results of these experiments are also available here. So first thing that we came to know was the pattern of the springs, the discharge pattern of the spring, it closely mirrors the rainfall. And these are the two areas, these are the drought-prone areas in South Sikkim, and these are the other areas. So in the drought-prone areas, we found that the spring discharge comes down to as much as low as 8 liters per minute. The discharge comes down to 8 LPM, and then it goes to after the monsoon. So just after the monsoons, it goes up to nearly 40 LPM. Again starts going down. So this is the period during the months of February, March, April. That is the lean season in the eastern Himalayas, because we have got early monsoon, summer monsoon. So February, March, April, this is the dry season, lean season for us. This is the time when everybody is facing a hardship for water. The second thing that Aquadam and others taught us was about geohydrology. So what they told was, unlike the watershed, if you have to recharge a spring, the recharge area may not just be above the spring. You have to identify the recharge area correctly based on many geohydrology concepts. And this was one new learning for us, so we included geohydrology studies in our program. We taught a cadre of para-professionals. They went to training to Aquadam, and this is now integrated in our government planning. So though the spring is here, as you can see, the spring is here, but the recharge area may be it may be on the top of a hill. So having a typical catchment approach, you may try to recharge just here, but maybe the recharge area is far up, it may be on the other side of the hill as well. So understanding this concept was very useful for us. So these are some of the steps that we have taken. So we have, so wherever we could identify the recharge area, we have dug trenches so that the rainfall that was flowing away into the nearest stream is captured in these trenches and ponds, and it is recharging our groundwater. So it's actually very simple and it's very cost effective. The second idea after springs was this hilltop forest. So hilltop forest, what we found was, since it's a government owned property, it's much easier to take up interventions. We can have bigger interventions, and we can enhance the hydrological potential of this forest. And there is this concept that if you have dense forest, then you will have very good recharge. It's not always true, and in some studies in Australia and even the villagers of Sikkim also tell us that depends on what kind of trees you have. If you have got oak forest with maybe a very good secondary and ground flora with lot of humus, then maybe your groundwater recharge may be good. But if you have trees like pines in the western Himalaya, or if you have got eucalyptus in Australia, or if you have got cryptomeria or dhupi in Sikkim, then these trees will actually extract your groundwater and they will throw the water away as transpiration. So in many of the places of Sikkim where we had these pine plantations, the water sources have really dried up below that. And the same problem is there with Darjeeling also. So even in natural forest, the natural recharge is only 10 to 15%. That is what it was a learning for us to understand that even in good dense forest, your recharge will hardly be more than 20%. So there is a huge potential to bring in this new dimension of improving the hydrological potential of hilltop forest. So how you can increase the natural groundwater recharge? By taking up simple methods like making ponds and trenches. So in Sikkim we have been able to enhance the groundwater recharge using this method by annually 500 million liters by taking up small projects on the top of the hills. So these are some of our most successful programs, and some of the streams that have dried up. Those streams have also, which were seasonal, are becoming perennial now in some of these most drought-prone areas. And we found this among the most simplest programs to implement. So this is a typical example. It's not very clear, but this is the top of the hill. There are these streams going down on both sides. So this was the area that we took up, and the activities we took up are something like this. Wherever there were depressions, we made these ponds, and on sloping lands we made these contour trenches. So during monsoons the water started filling up. The water that would have flowed down into these streams and caused floods and landslides below is actually getting converted into groundwater. Then on some of the upper catchments of our important critical streams which we use for drinking water, like in South District they use Barmeri stream for drinking water, in Gangtok we use Radhechu. So the upper catchments of these rivers, we have started this small program to supplement the groundwater recharge. So these are tough programs that take place at 10,000 feet, 11,000 feet, you have to set up labor camps. So these programs have also been initiated.